Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us 37 minutes past the hour. On my immediate right, Cynthia Asienwa is Nguvu Change leader. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, and lovely to have you here, and so timely is this discussion. Sam Ogwal in the far right is a youth envoy from IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Much appreciated. Brenda Ongalo is an advocate of the High Court. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you. Kennedy Sankara is an activist, has been at the forefront of the demonstrations against the finance bill. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely having you here on the broadcast. Nora Bosibori is youth policy analyst, also with us in the studio. Good morning, Nora.
Good morning, Ayub.
Lovely to have you here. And Kasmuel Makoure is an activist joining us this morning here as well on the broadcast. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Much appreciated, and thanks for your presence here. And looking at what has been happening over the past 14 days, and it's interesting to have the front page of the Standard newspaper, which basically is a reflection of the cabinet meeting which happened yesterday at State House, and says the last supper after weeks of demonstrations. Yesterday's cabinet meeting could be the last for one, at least for 7 members of the cabinet. Push the wall on wastage and extravagance in government. The president has decided to see off ministers and principal secretaries as the first line of reforming his government following the demonstrations. And you are all aware that he has agreed to join young Kenyans on X platform today on Friday, and of course to respond to some of the questions that will be pointed his direction by the young Kenyans. First, coming to you, Nora, given the hint that he gave on Sunday at a possible reorganization because of what he termed as opulence and the conduct of senior government officials, the display of wealth that some of them can't account for if an audit is done on their lifestyle, does it appear that the head of state is bending towards the demand for good governance by young Kenyans, which often comes at no surprise, over them correcting over the failures of what some have been unable to achieve, including their parents?
First, Ayub, I would like to, first of all, condole with the families that have lost their loved ones during this period that we are agitating for real change, especially as young people who have been, you know, like marginalized and excluded from political processes and even policies that actually do not favor us. So first of all, even to come through on what the Standard is intimating today, is that some of the cabinet secretaries could actually be having a last supper with the president. And talking about the last supper, really, I take note, of course, of the Last Supper from the Bible. And of course, we note that in the Bible, Jesus actually was having a Last Supper as he talked to his people, his disciples, about servanthood. So I wonder if the president was actually also talking to his strategic team about servant leadership that has been lacking in his leadership. And of course, talking about leadership, really, Ayub, we come to the appointing authority. The appointing authority is the president. The buck stops with the president. For how long are we going to contend with inept leadership, for example? And that is the overarching question. But then again, taking you back to August 1st, 2023, the president himself, quoted by the newspaper, Star newspaper, said that he was disappointed that some of his cabinet secretaries and also the PSS do not understand what their mandate really is. So then who really is the problem? Is it the person who's been appointed and given a mandate, or it's the appointing authority? What are the metrics, for example, in choosing these people to run such serious dockets? So it is a problem of integrity from the top. Who do we choose to run these offices? What criteria do we use? And when we talk about technocrats, who are technocrats really? Anybody who's gone to school? Do we have an appraisal system where we can come and say that the cabinet secretaries are in place and that within this period of time, this is what they've achieved? Are we able to appraise our technocrats if there is technocrats in government? Because at the end of the day, Ayub, you understand that power dynamics are very, very tricky. that sometimes we could be putting a noose on the neck of these people, and maybe they do not call the shots. Maybe they do not actually have the responsibility to run these parastatals and departments. So the buck stops with the president.
Okay.
If there is inept leadership in his regime, then he has to crack the whip, show goodwill, and lead the way to make sure that accountability is back in place and that we can put men and women of integrity in our offices. Okay,
Kennedy, does this satisfy some of the demands that were laid out by the demonstrators, given that it's now spilling over into a governance issue that the head of state is taking note of, also the conduct of senior state officials, including cabinet members?
Thank you, Ayub. First, allow me condole with the families of those gallant men and women who lost their lives under unjustifiable circumstances in the hands of a security system that is constitutionally mandated to protect the lives of the people of Kenya. The actions of the president amounts to PR gimmicks. I think even the so-called X space that is about to host today, it is inappropriate for the president to think that he can listen to the people of Kenya in a span of 2 hours, while it takes a whole day flying aimlessly with choppers left, right, and center to sell the UDA bottom-up agenda in various counties. Why does he think that he can handle these issues within 1 day? Who is going to call shots in that particular space that is going to host? The reshufflement in the cabinet, we do not really advocate for reshufflement. It's like transferring a problem from one department to the other. If you are incompetent, if you are unable to deliver, you either shape up or ship out. So our call to the president was not to reshuffle the cabinet. Our demands were crystal clear. We are demanding on accountable leadership. And that is why we are coming up as citizen accountability system, where we want to hold public leaders accountable of whatever it is that they are doing. Because we know the provisions of Chapter 1, Article 1 and 2. The sovereignty of the people and the supremacy of the Constitution. So whatever it is that we are actually doing is within our rights. The only problem is that people have normalized injustices for a very long time, to an extent that when we come out bold and courageous to call out on the ills of the government, some may think that we are there as anarchists, as some of the ministers put it. I don't think it is also right for someone in his own right senses to equate entire demonstration process to an anarchy. Why would you think of congratulating a police officer at a time that the Human Rights Watch is claiming over 40 lives lost in the hands of the police, but you cannot call out on the police injustices? All you see is a dangerous, treasonous criminal gang. And these are people who are out there, executing their constitutional rights under Article 37. Wakili here will tell you that there is nowhere in the Constitution that we are required to go and, delegate that role to participate in public protest to a police officer. We know these are appointees of the executive. So the moment we take power back to them to allow us when we can come and speak in a manner that we want, is that not usurpation of the sovereignty of the people?
But where do you draw the line when it comes to what appears to be the blurring line between peaceful demonstrators and those who are hell-bent on destruction of property and looting of businesses, as we had witnessed? Because events of 25th June were totally different from what happened in the subsequent days, where we had seen businesses that were looted, destructions that were done. But if you look at the 25th of June events that ended up with the breach of security of Parliament, the demonstrators, who are largely the Gen Zs, were peaceful throughout the day, and they never caused any destruction of property. So where do you draw the line in exercising that right and making sure that other people's also rights are not violated?
You know, Ayub, it is the responsibility of the police to provide security to demonstrators. But in this case, we have a country whereby the police operate like TVs being remote controlled. Their focus shifts from protecting demonstrators to attacking protesters. I am speaking as a protester with experience. I was tear gassed, I was intimidated, I was in the streets. You find a police officer telling you that, please, I don't want to see you there. which curfew were they enforcing? Were we under any security restriction that we are not supposed to be in the streets? So the moment you find out that, actually when you go to the streets, you'll find out that most of the violence that emanates from protests are not instigated by protesters. These things are done by unprofessional police officers, and I call them goons in respectable attires. These are the men who, go hunting young men and women, peacefully demonstrating, dispersing them with tear gas. You find a police officer just throwing tear gas left, right, and center without the aim. You ask yourself, what is the purpose of throwing this tear gas? So it is not about me drawing line between a peaceful protest and a violent one. The state must first showcase responsibility by protecting the people participating in the demonstration. It is their responsibility to identify that the character that has been exuded by that particular person do not amount to a peaceful protester, but a violent protester. So it is not my responsibility. In this case, the state has failed. They only monitor us. When the young people are being brutalized and killed by the police officers, the state is silent. But when violence erupts, the state is very vigilant, and they are warning us. We are watching over you. Okay. We lose hands. Are we safe?
Yes. Just hold on there, because we'll proceed from there as to the conduct of the police. Cynthia, do the talk about possible changes in government inspire confidence in young Kenyans?
I'm not really sure that it inspires confidence, because one thing I know, young people are just heirs. We have inherited a system of injustices where so much is on paper, but so much is not being done the right way. And that is why people are shocked right now to see a generation of young people who are boldly and fearlessly going out to protest for their rights, which are in the Constitution. And that's why you'll find some people saying that, there are times I heard people saying that the protests are sponsored. I do not know why someone would say the protests are sponsored. It's because they are not used to this system. And this is a generation of young people who've been organized for a long period of time. And I think it just erupted to just show the world that we are watching. We always see what is happening, even though sometimes we do not talk about it. But this is now the right time for us to talk about these things. So, so much is normally on paper, but so much is not being done. And that is why we are coming out to call on relevant authorities and stakeholders to make sure that we are not just passive people that not involved in policy making, not involved in policy formulation. And that's why I'm looking forward to that experts conversation with the president, just to get to know how are they planning to include young people in the policies that they are formulating. Because 80% of the Kenyan population is made up of young people. And you cannot at any point ignore 80% and just concentrate on 20%, which is also made up of old people. But just a few Kenyans are taking over this country in terms of resources, opportunities, and the young people are being left out. And so I do not think, going forward, what we need to do is look at the policies that we have and follow up on them to make sure that they're being done, not on paper, but on ground. Okay.
Kasmuel, you have been on the forefront and of the demonstrations that happened across the country, majorly in Nairobi. When you look at some of the pledges that were made thereafter, the concession, withdraw the finance bill, hinted changes in government, possibly also at the cabinet level, and they talk about now the president agreeing also to join the experts to hear from young Kenyans. Does this, from your perspective, create the notion and the feeling that you have a listening government finally following the demonstrations? And how do you plan to engage them? How do you plan to engage the president when he finally comes on that space?
Thank you, Abdi. First of all, I would like to condole, as well as my fellow colleagues have said, with the families that lost gallant fighters for our liberation. Poleni sana kwa wanaougua makiwa. Ugueni pole. Just to go back to the question, I do not think this move inspires an ounce of confidence in our generation. I say this because there has been a gross violation of the Constitution of Kenya by all three arms of government, from the executive all the way to the judiciary. I say this because this promise or these kinds of reforms, the concessions that the president is making, would not have happened they were only necessitated by the peaceful demonstrations that the young people of Kenya organized. It is imperative for us to think about where this point is coming from. Is this a response or is it a reaction? It has taken far too many lives for the president to make this concession now. There is a time when this would have happened without any lives lost. One life was one too many. But right now we have become desensitized to so many, the pilferage and the loss of lives is so much that the Kenyan spirit is almost fatigued. There used to be a time when it was just one life. Now it is over 40 lives. So I do not think it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a political place. And if you're talking about a reshuffling of cabinet, it does not in any way lead to or effect any positive change. And I say this because it is important for us to have good systems. Good systems should be able to be run even by bad people. And the fact that we are being given concessions that are not constitutional, that the president cannot pursue constitutionally, shows that this is a politicization of an issue that does not require politics. And I say this because one of the biggest things this movement prides itself in, it's in its peacefulness, its leaderlessness, and its fearlessness. And a lot of the time, the things that we are agitating for are good governance, accountability, justice, and equality to the law. These are things which he only needs to do without listening to us. And I say this does not inspire my confidence because the political class has taken some of the agenda that we were raising and are now using them as talking points in the legislative houses. If the executive cannot listen to its legislators, to the voices, to our representatives, saying the exact same things that we are saying on ground, I do not see what being on an X space would achieve. Because if he cannot listen to his legislators, if he cannot listen to a fellow arm of government, because these are things that we have consistently said, it does not inspire any confidence to me. Again, if the government is calling us to an X space for issues that we have raised, I think they're getting this wrong. It should meet us on our terms. And I've seen a lot of people ask that you said the president should come and listen to young people on X as the youth. And now he said he's coming to X and you're boycotting it. And I would say that the government should also learn to sit in the discomfort. In social sciences and in these conversations, there's something that a lot of friends used to tell me when I would get social issues wrong. Kaz, sit in the discomfort. We invite the government to sit in the discomfort because all these gimmicks are unnecessary if only they would follow the Constitution. I am not inspired, and I do not think this is coming from a point of good faith. It is coming mostly from a point of public relations. If they only followed the Constitution, ran a meritocracy, had accountability, fought the war on graft, got rid of the unconstitutional positions and inept people, stopped funding unconstitutional places, the pilferage and the austerity measures that they are suggesting are merely gimmicks. If we run this country constitutionally, because the people of Kenya have shown that it is very possible to do much with little. We have activists like Hanifa who have taken care of health and have shown us how we can revolutionize the healthcare sector. We have set up communication through the Twitter spaces that you've seen. It's very easy to rally people. The Medics for Kenya have built quite literally the biggest hospital on a volunteer basis to show us that these things are possible. And I'm afraid that if we continue delegating these things to the citizens, because what they were doing, once the police started brutalizing people, if you read their constitutional mandate, they should protect, and if they use the only enough force, not even violence, but if they injure people, they're supposed to provide support. You see situations where a doctor says they have hurt patients, they have casualties and wounded people, and the police said, we'll kill even more. It is very, I do not see any form of goodwill in that, Ayub.
Sam, what's the view of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development in all what's happening across the country, given the demonstrations that were spearheaded by young Kenyans?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, allow me to add my voice to the colleagues, to condole with the families that have lost their young ones, and also to wish those ones who are in the hospital a quick recovery. One thing that I want us to look at is that our region, specifically the Horn of Africa, is considered to be one of the youngest regions in the continent, but also within the globe. And that means that the voices of the young people, who are the majorities, must be taken very seriously. When you look at the nature of the protest that has happened, or that is still going on in Kenya, it's a progression that the generation of this time have different demands that the system in place are not responding to. When you look at from the generation since independence, the likes of Kenyatta, President Obote of Uganda, and Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, during that time, our region was facing the human resource capital, the human resource issues, whereby graduates would get out of the university and they find opportunities are there. The private sectors earn. At the same time, the public sectors were competing for this graduate. So our attention was drawn into developing our human resource capacity. Now, we are at the state whereby those opportunities are not there. And those opportunities comes in because the system that were put in place are very restrictive to the extent whereby it's very hard for young people to get that. And if you don't have the opportunities, I can give an example. If you are not employed, you will face economic challenges. The majority of our young people are spending a lot of time studying within the university and graduating. But when they're unsure of where they will be after the education, so these are very fundamental and genuine issues. So now when you predict that the situation that you're going through is unpredictable, then you must be versatile. You must now start thinking outside the box. Now, let me relate it to the finance bill. The young people were very smart to see that if this comes out, we are going to go through economic depression. Because first of all, the opportunities for them to earn a living is very limited. The first protest was fueled by the people who were either out of the university or they're still within the university. Now, when they look at that, when you look at that personally, you see that these are young people who are demanding the government to respond in a way that provide opportunities for them to get employed, but also they're looking at the future of the children that they will possibly have in future, how they will survive. So it was a very fundamental thing. And the young people within the region are learning, but it's also a wake-up call for the government within the region to treat the demands of the young people with importance.
We'll talk about the effect this will have across the border and the voices of many young sub-Saharan Africans, and this largely attributed to the sub-Saharan Spring, more or less an equivalent of what happened across the northern part of the continent, many equating it to the Arab Spring of 2011 that was largely spearheaded by young Arabs across Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and spread into Syria, Lebanon, and other parts of Middle East. Brenda, coming to you, can this be an opportunity for the government to harvest from this crisis and amend some of the past mistakes that it made, and by extension, the other mistakes that were made by the previous administrations in more or less overlooking the significant sway that young people hold in terms of their organizational skills, in terms of the depths of their educational levels, and how they can be an important component in the running of government affairs?
I'd start from the point of saying this comes in a little too late. However, it is good that the president has realized suddenly and has experienced his Damascus moment and realized that, oh, I have been on the wrong and now there's time, this is the time I'm supposed to make amends. Whatever he is doing now should have come 2-3 months ago or a year ago when he realized that his cabinet was consistent of inept people, when he realized he had to micromanage each and every ministry, when the voices of Kenyans started becoming loud. The reason why we are talking about this, the reason why these protests have been what they have been, is because for once you're dealing with a population that is armed with the information and focus, which is one thing that has been lacking throughout, because you see the pattern of the previous demonstrations or the previous ways where Kenyans have expressed themselves, most of the time there had been that lack of coordination and many people not understanding. That's why we got so mad when you hear MPs just before Occupy Parliament happened talking about those people on the streets have not read that document. Those people on the streets do not know why they were there. It was an insult because those people on the streets were the same people who participated, who were very active in public participation spaces, and they had read it and they had broken it down to very understandable pieces to even the illiterate. Because it was for the first time we see a talk of finance bill being discussed on TikTok, having been translated into our local native languages. I saw somebody do a very brilliant discussion on finance bill in Luo. I saw the other do it in Somalia. I saw another one in Kikuyu. Everyone had an effort to make sure that people understood. And the fact that they downplayed the reason why people were on the street is where the mistake started. Because that is us not talking about the extravagance that we have experienced, the mpende msipopenda attitude that this government came in with, the fact that people have been making these noises, the fact that people have been making the complaints, and there's no response to it. So the president is wholly responsible for the mess we are in right now, and it's only better that it is him who can get us out of this. So if I were him, this is the point that you make all those radical changes and don't do them for the sake of doing them. The same way that they made public participation look like it was for the sake of it. So let us see heads roll. Let us see proper governance going forward.
And when we get back from the break, by extension, ladies and gentlemen, we'll also focus on the critical roles that institutions do play. They are crucial, they are consequential. Parliament and also the executive by extension, which has failed the Kenyan people. If you look at the makeup of the cabinet, some already had integrity issues, but they were cleared by Parliament, which more or less was placed constitutionally in that role, but appears to be not a guardrail, but rather a facilitator of what the executive wants and how that finance bill aspect came into play and the subsequent withdrawal, and whether that can again bring back the sort of the independence Parliament ought to be having in the constitutional undertakings that it ought to undertake. This is Daybreak. We thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. More after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.